Welcome back to the Thinking Out Loud podcast. My name is Kevin Wilson, and I've got Kyle Wenzel here. We're in the Thinking Out Loud studios, and we're excited to have you guys back for another episode. And when we think about all the things that are happening right now with COVID and this pandemic, just looking at some of the ways that people are consuming their church right now. So a lot of churches had to go, as you know, online. A lot of churches had to do things in a much different way than what we've normally. Oh my God, I can't. I have to start all over. Because I didn't even talk about what we're going to talk about today. I just kind of went into this thing. I don't know what's with me today. All right, Logan, we're starting again. Welcome back to the Thinking Out Loud podcast. My name is Kevin Wilson, and I've got Kyle Wenzel here with me in the Thinking Out Loud studios. And we're excited to be back for another episode of the podcast this week. And, this week we thought about talking a little bit about just church attendance, young adults being in church, just kind of the overall climate of where church is, just in general right now. As well as I do, churches have had to change kind of their way of doing things. A lot of churches went online. And some of them are still fully online. Others are doing a little bit of both. Others are fully back in their buildings. But as you look at statistics, even before COVID, there seemed to be somewhat of a decline in people going to church and being part of the church. And I mean, I look at it and I say, you know what? This is the time that we should be, like, more than any time now, we should be, in church. So we want to talk a little bit and just have an open, honest discussion of why some people are not in church. We've got young adults. You look around your church. You don't see a lot of 18 to 35-year-olds, and maybe you might see some declining in church attendance just across the board. But we've looked at the research and we found some interesting things that I think that you guys will love to hear. And Kyle and I are going to talk about them today.
Yeah, and I think it's an important topic. Church is important. I mean, having the discipleship, having a shepherd, somebody who is going to be a constant voice, a constant godly opinion in your life, especially in a crucial time like young adults, where you're figuring out your own way of life, things that you like to do, ways you like to live your life, finding your significant other, having kids, building a foundation for your future. It's imperative, especially if you've grown up in the church as a teenager or, a kid to a teenager. It's imperative that we continue to go down that path of having that moral compass to benefit us when we make decisions, when we build character, when we're trying to formulate our own way of life. And so it should be on the forefront of the minds of leaders in the church, but it also should be on the forefront of the minds of us, our generation, Kevin. We have kids,
Yeah.
and we are older when you speak in terms of young adults. I am just on the edge of that, but you, sir, I'm just messing, man. He's young, ladies and gentlemen. He's but what I'm saying is it's kind of an onus on us to make sure that, we are staying engaged with the fact that the church is built for a reach. It is built for discipleship. It is built to reach the lost and to disciple the found. And I think that in order to do that, there's no age limit. There's no bias towards an age. It's from the day you're born to the day you go into eternity. That's the church's goal. And so it's an important time to talk about it. It's an important topic to keep in mind beyond even this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle. And I think what we'll do, as we air this show today, check our social media. I'd like to put up just a question, because I don't assume that everyone that is listening to us, we have people listening like all over the place, and I think there are different walks of life, and I don't assume that every person that listens to us is a Christian or goes to church,
Right.
which we want anybody, I mean everybody, to tune into the show, and that's what keeps it interesting. I think, if you're not going to church, I'd like to know why. We'd like to know why. If you are going to church, we'd like to know, why. What are some of the things that you really feel like, that keeps you going? And so there's some research that's been done, and I love Barna. Like, man, George Barna, he does some really, really good research. And if you're ever looking for just some deep research, some wide-ranging research, check out the Barna Group. They're awesome, and they've been doing this statistics and research on the church for years. Pew Research is also another one that's really good, but Barna just basically did a poll on why Christians go to church, and what they say are missing. And I'm just curious, as we go through this, I'm just really, really curious on what you guys say about this. What, can you identify with some of these things that we're going to read to you today, and that we're going to talk about and we're going to discuss? Because I think, everybody has their reasons. Some people get hurt in church, right? And they're like, you know what? I'm just, never going to go back, which at some point I think we want to talk about that too as well, because there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of people that unfortunately has been hurt. Church is a place where humans are, and anywhere there's humans, there's going to be hurt, because
Hmm.
that we're human.
Hmm.
That's just all it is to it. We're not going to be perfect, right? So but I think it's really important for us just to have a little just a discussion about this, especially right now during the pandemic, because a lot of people are saying, if you read some of the Christian thinkers and things, they're saying things like, if we do go back to normal and everybody goes back into the building, that there's going to be a percentage that is not going to return to church now that we've been in this pandemic, and they didn't have to go to a building, and that they could consume it online. They're saying that there's going to be a decline, and as a person who's been a senior pastor, and Kyle, of course, has been a pastor as well, this is not good. Like,
No.
we need the church. We need, and yeah, I mean, you say, well, do you need to go to a building? I'm not saying you absolutely have to go to a building. What I am saying is that's where we go to congregate, to gather, to do life together. It's not just one or two things that we do there. We do many things there. And it's good to be in communion with fellow believers.
Oh, and also we're creatures of habit, and so
Yep.
part of the reason why we're gonna see a decline in church attendance when things go back to normal, or as normal as they're gonna get, is because, well, people were going straight out of habit. It's just something they did on a Wednesday night, or it's something they did on a Sunday. But now that they've been forced to break that habit, there is a new habit, right? But we're also creatures in habit, in the sense that the church, we say it all the time, isn't the building. Okay, the building houses the church. Socially, we need to be Christian. Socially, we need to be faithful. And what ignites our movement physically and socially in society is going and being a part of a social structure, and part of being online. I get it. There is a place for online. There is a place for
Yes.
live stream. There's a place for that. But there is a very powerful place for socially being involved in your church.
Yep.
And it starts in the building, but socially being involved in the building is what amplifies and motivates you to then develop that skill set there, so you can go outside of the church, and oftentimes you get to practice that skill set inside the church building. You get to meet about it. You get to, you know what I'm saying? Like there's structure that's built within the structure so that the church doesn't have to be the structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
It's-
yeah.
structure is built within the structure so that the church doesn't have to be the structure. You know what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
so I think it's super important that I think churches are doing their best to find ways to keep everybody involved. And I think they're doing their best because they know it's inevitable. There's going to be a decline in church attendance. And so I think churches for the most part have done their best at figuring out how to capitalize on their reach. You know what I'm saying, as far as this pandemic goes, and is going to continue to affect organizations like the church.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Kyle. And I'm sitting here, looking at this research right now, and just kind of want to go through it with you, Kyle, and go through it with our listeners.
Okay.
And maybe some of you guys can identify with this, and if you can, sound off, on our Facebook page, and just kind of let us know. But so Barna asks, it's about almost 5,000 Christians. A lot of them are the young adult age, so, in the 18 to 35 range or so. And we have a lot of 18 to 35s that listen to us. And of course, much older than that as well. But it says, what Christians go to church and what they say is missing. So they ask them, why do you participate in your community of worship? And 63% said to grow in my faith.
Mhm.
And I guess I look at that, and for me, I say yes, absolutely. I think that's part of it. That's part of why we go to church. But, and I'm just being, I'm being honest, and I'm just gonna, just kind of share my feelings on this. I'm just, I feel like that. I don't know if we should always go to church to grow in our faith, in the sense that that's the reason why we go.
Mhm.
Because if church on Sunday morning is the only time that you're getting, you're reading the word, it's just the only time that you're spending time in worship, if it's the only time that you're spending time around other believers, and that's what you mean by growing faith, then we're missing the whole point of coming together as the church. Because in my opinion, everything that we do at home during the week, when we get together on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights or whatever, your church Saturday nights, um, that's an overflow or an outflow of the time that we've spent with God during the week. It
Mm.
shouldn't be the first time that we get together and say, okay, pastor, because I feel like, and Kyle, you can, chime in on this, but I feel like it's one of those things where, it's that thing. Well, man, the worship team, they better sing my right song, man. They better sing me a song that can get me to go in,
Mhm.
or the pastor better preach a relevant message, because if he doesn't preach a relevant message, it's going to seem like a waste of time.
Mhm.
And I would say, if you have a robust relationship with God outside of church on Sunday morning, and you're like in your Bible studying, you're praying, you're spending some time in worship, it doesn't really matter what the pastor preaches. It doesn't matter what the worship team sings. All that because you're going to be in tune with whatever God is saying, whatever God is doing, and you're just going to happy to be there with other fellow believers.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where you take the discipleship part, right? So,
Yeah.
you're growing in your faith Monday through Sunday.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You're partnering with the discipleship of your pastor to grow into your faith. We're adults, so we know how to do a lot of things on our own. His discipleship, right? His leading of his congregation, we're to partner with that through the rest of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And we're there because we agree with his teaching. Whether or not it's relevant for what we're going through, it's relevant to us because it's God's word, and
Right.
we need to learn it. But then we take it and partner that alongside of whatever discipleship we're going through on a weekly basis. So my pastor doesn't know all the intricate parts of my personal life. My
Right.
God does.
Right.
And I need to make sure that in throughout the week, my relationship with God is okay, God, here's what's going on today. I want to have this conversation with you. And obviously you're reading his word and stuff. But then that Sunday is your pastor shepherding his church as one body for the relevance of that church, right? And
Right.
so again, yeah, you're gonna grow in your faith on Sunday, but the growing in the faith needs to happen throughout the week too. So
Yeah, 100%. So, the next one that's under the why do you participate in your community of worship was 61% said to learn about God. And this, like, so on the surface, this sounds great. Like,
mhm.
yeah, of course you go to church to learn about God. But here's the problem with it. If we are depending on our pastors alone to learn about God, how will you ever know if there's error? Like that,
Well,
that
well, that's probably why you see a decline in adults attending church.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, if you're, a guy told me one time, sometimes the cause me prayer is the perfect prayer
Mm,
because we're human,
mm,
right?
mm.
We're not always going to desire to learn about God. We're not always going to desire to have that relationship. It's our flesh. Okay.
Right.
We don't have the time. We don't have the humility because it takes a lot of humility. We don't have the desire to fix or work on certain things. And he said, don't be ashamed. He was telling me, like, he's like, don't be ashamed to say, Lord, cause me to desire you more.
Yeah.
Cause me to want to make certain changes in my life. Cause me to develop a discipline. And if we don't have that cause me attitude,
Mm,
um,
that's good.
we're probably more likely to drop out of things that we're committed to because we just don't have the desire to say, okay, I know this isn't right now, so I'm gonna need some help.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that the answer's good, right? Like you want to learn about God, but hopefully that's not the only place you're doing it.
Right, right. And yeah, and I think this just speaks to, the other statistics that we read, and that is, this is one of the most biblical, illiterate generations that we've ever had. Like people, they're not picking up their Bible on their own, and it's so important, guys. I just encourage you. You cannot, everything that your pastor says, everything that you hear on podcasts, on other TV shows, whatever the case may be, read the Bible for yourselves. Make sure that what you're hearing is biblical.
Mhm.
Like, because we're putting our trust a lot of times in men and saying that, like, oh, well, if this man or woman of God says it, well, then it must be true because of who they are. And you have to understand that that's not always true. And the only way that error is if that you're reading the word and that you're understanding, the word. And I encourage you, if you're looking for resources and you're looking for, especially if you're a millennial out there, you're a young adult, you're looking for resources and help, go to our website, but also contact us through Facebook and say,
Mhm.
listen, I'm a seeker. I just want to know more about God. I don't know where to start. I don't even know what to do. We will help you. We love doing that. Like, I'll tell you, I love, 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 walking somebody through and helping disciple them through their early journey of their relationship with God, and then walking through with them. Like, it brings me so much joy. So if you're out there and you're questioning, or you just have questions that's keeping you out of church, you just have things where you're just like, man, I just have never had somebody to be able to answer these questions for me. Reach out to us. Reach out,
Yeah.
message us on Facebook, message us on Instagram, private message us, whatever the case may be, or send us an email through our website, and thinkingoutloudmedia.com. But we'd love to help you there. But you know the only way that you get and you understand is not just going to church, but you have to research and you have to study yourself. And I think
Yeah.
that's important.
One of the one of the biggest concerns is the best part about society right now is the word of God is spreading like a wildfire through YouTube videos and live stream, and like it's not confined to physically being in church. That's awesome, but that's also a problem
Right.
because there's a lot of bad teaching, I mean, even in worship songs, you got worship teams that are creating their own worship songs, and you listen to the lyrics. The lyrics are supposed to be edifying. They're supposed to glorify God, but they're supposed to be scripturally sound.
That's right.
A lot of the worship songs you find, they are verses from the Bible. And so there are times where some very popular worship bands now, I mean, there's songs now that I just won't listen to because, and you could call me super legalistic, that's fine. I won't, they're great songs and they're powerful songs and I get pumped up, but I listen to the lyrics and I'm like, that's biblically unsound.
Right.
Like,
Right.
like if I'm going to learn God through this worship song, I'm not learning God. That isn't biblical. What's being spoken of right now. And that's just an example, but because it's so out there and it's so accessible, I think that we also need to be a little more guarded in making sure that just because the message sounds good and it speaks to us, that it's the Bible that's speaking to us, and it's not some false teaching or teaching that's taking out of context. And again, I think that also leads to, you talk about hurt in a church and you talk about misleading in a church and people leaving. Some of that comes out of bad teaching.
That's right.
And it didn't
100%.
stick. It didn't stick in the leadership. It didn't stick in the application because it wasn't biblical. It wasn't meant to stick.
Right.
It failed because it wasn't biblical. And instead of blaming the teaching, we're blaming the pastor that taught it. We're blaming the leaders that tried to apply it, and they failed, or the person failed. And so I think as pastors, we need to make sure that we know a punchline is going to be a punchline, but it better be a punchline because it's biblical. You know what I'm saying? If it's biblical, it's going to handle itself.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, if you're listening and if you're following that teaching, I think there's a lot of credibility in a pastor that'll look you back in the face and say, what I'm about to tell you, I want you to research for yourself. That tells me when they say something like that they've done their research, that they are confident that it is exactly what the Bible's saying, but they are also putting room out there to say, hey, you also need to understand that it is your duty to do this research, to learn this word, to make sure you understand what is being spoken. And if you don't agree with it, you're doing your research, you know? So it's very important that we find out the truth in the word of God.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I'll never forget, you know, just a couple years ago or so, my wife and I were young marriage leaders at a church. And there was a student that we had in our class, because we taught marriage classes. And there was a student in our class that would always come, and and it seemed like no matter what I taught, she always had a question, and she would question me on what I was teaching. And, you know, and she would just give me these alternative views, or she would give me whatever. And I loved it. And I think some of the other people in the class were probably like, man, he's probably getting annoyed. But I loved it, because that meant that she was taking what I was saying, she was going home, she was dissecting it and saying, well, wait a minute, but what about this? Or she was saying, well, yeah, I heard you say that, but what about this? Or what about that? She challenged me. And you know what? Any good Bible believing person is going to encourage that, because they're about sound doctrine. So they're not, and we'll, you know, there's going to be a future show at some point. We'll talk about, you know, some bad theology that's taught in churches and stuff like that. You know, I can camp out on that all day, because that's just one of my topics that I love talking about, because I feel like it's so important that people have the right theology. But saying that, I love the fact that she would come to class and she challenged me. And she wasn't trying to challenge me just to challenge me. She was challenging me because, you know, she really wanted to learn and she wanted to know. You know, to me, a student that never asks a question, that concerns me, because my thing is, you should always have a question about something that you've never heard before, or something that, you know, maybe you have heard before, but maybe it's being taught by a different person. How do you learn if you don't ask questions? So, you know, I think that's important. But so continuing the why do you participate in your community of worship? Others said, one of the things they said is, it's how I live out my faith. Which, that's it. Like that's how we live out our faith. But for only 40% Only 40%. So it dropped from 61% to learn, that's learning about God, to 40% said it's how I live out my faith. And I think that, I think going to church, the Bible says, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together, especially when you see that day approaching. It's talking about the last days. And so as we get closer and closer to the last days, we are not supposed to neglect being together. So that is part of living out your faith, for sure. Um, so why do you participate in your community of worship? Another one was teaching that are relevant to my life. That was 40%. 40% of people said teachings that are relevant to my life. I listen, everything in the word is relevant to our lives. Like, for sure. Wisdom for how to live faithfully, 39%. Worship and music, 37%. Wisdom for how scriptures apply to my life, 35%. That scares me a little bit because, if you're trying, listen, there's tons of wisdom in scriptures for how to, to how to apply the scriptures to your life. There's tons of wisdom in the scriptures. So to me, that should be 100% of people should have said, looking for wisdom for how scriptures apply to my life. 33% said because it's the right thing to do. 28% said prayer events, and 24% said to be involved with my community. That's listen, you need to be involved in your community. So I think if you're saying, hey, this is why I participate in the community of worship, that should be 100%, because we should all be involved in our community.
And I think that answer is gonna vary because quite honestly, it's gonna depend on whether or not the church is involved in the community.
That's so true.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I bet you the percentage of people who said that their churches are highly involved in the community, because there's pure joy when that's something that's championed in the church. It's championed in the church. I mean, there's not just one or two outlets. Everything you do seems to culminate in getting involved in the community. Everything you're teaching on seems to culminate in getting it out there to the community, getting the community into the church. And so you'll find, I know just from the church that I belong to, the desire for that is big because it's represented well. It's almost as if it's like, this is the standard of living in this church, and so, and then in other churches, it's not as championed, or it's not at all championed. And so you don't have that, you just don't have that result in the poll. One thing you said earlier was about, people want sermons based off of their life, stuff that's going to relate to their life, relevant to their life. I think one of the indications that you're in a healthy church is not that they're just specifically talking about things you're dealing with in your life, like certain sins or certain scenarios, or, I'm saying, like certain trials, but the fact that they are addressing society and social issues.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Coming from a pastor, it's not easy to be able to, you try to plan weeks out. You're really trying to do your research. And sometimes, man, society just throws a curveball. COVID's a curveball. And then racial injustice inside of COVID is like a two-seamed fastball, slider, curveball, knuckleball, all in one. Yeah. And if you have a shepherd, you have a pastor who's willing to get down and grapple with those issues because he cares about his congregation enough to say, well, I was going to talk about this series and it's a really good series and it's going to motivate the people, but I'm going to put that on the back burner because right now I have a people that need to be shepherded through a situation. They need to be shepherded through a season. Yep. That's relevant. It may not motivate you to make this huge life altering, but what it's doing is it's teaching you how to live out your faith in some of the hardest times the world's ever seen. And so don't be duped by the fact that maybe the message wasn't as motivational. Maybe it wasn't as fired up and amped up. Maybe your pastor went from a preacher to a teacher for a couple weeks.
That's right.
Be able to discern that and realize, oh my goodness, he's He's wanting to make sure that he's shepherding his flock.
That's right.
He's wanting to make sure he protects his flock. And at times, your preacher is going to turn into a teacher,
That's
and
right.
it's going to be class 101 Christianity in society, because that's what you need, and that is relevant to your life.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You made so many good points there. And I will tell you, sometimes, we as pastors, we get stuck in a style. And when you get stuck in a style, and like he said, there's a huge difference between preaching and teaching. And
Yeah.
when you get stuck in a style of preaching, you say, man, I like to take my coat off, throw it across the stage. I like to be running around sweating with my, if that is your definition of what a good sermon is, then you really miss you have a misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding of what a sermon is. And we should be teaching God's people, and everybody's style is different, but people should come out of church understanding and being able to then go into their study and even dig even deeper. People need to be taught. And I think millennials, and I think this is one of the reasons why, millennials are saying that, hey, I go because it's relevant to my life. They're looking for relevant things that's going to make sense for their life today. And I'll tell you right now, I have a huge heart for young adults. Because I feel like a lot of young adults today don't realize that a lot of what is going on, a lot of things that they face is truly is truly answered and talked about in the Bible. They just don't see the Bible as relevant to where they are. Or that the Bible can really speak into their situation. And the Bible speaks better than any book. I don't care if the book was written by a pastor, priest, prophet, it doesn't matter. The Bible speaks to that way deeper, with much more wisdom, the greatest wisdom, because that wisdom came from God. And so I think it's extremely important that we teach and we disciple. And you know what? If you're an inspirational teaching pastor and that's your thing, make sure you have discipleship people that's under you that can disciple people well, that are actually
Yeah.
teaching people
Yeah.
the word. Hire your weakness, right? We say that in the secular market.
Yeah.
You hire your weakness, right? So if me in the human resource field, if I'm not good at recruiting, I need to hire a recruiter. If I'm not good at multitasking, I need to hire somebody that's a great multitasker, right? We're not saying that you have to be good at everything, but at least hire your weakness. So if you say, man, I'm just not into the teaching, I'm not into the expository, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, I will tell you, people need that. So get some people on your staff, or let some volunteers that you trust and you can trust with the word of God, let them teach on a Wednesday night or Saturday night, or have a class or a small group at their home, and allow them to break open the word of God, because this generation needs to be biblically literate. It is so important, especially now with so much information, as Kyle said earlier, swirling around the internet. There's not a shortage of information, as we say at the opening of every show, but there is a shortage of truth, and so we've got to get them into that. And one thing I wanted to piggyback on what you said, Kyle, was being involved in the community is so important. Whatever you make as a pastor, whatever you make important, that's what your people are going to think is important. So if you make missions important, if you make, feeding the poor, the homeless, the orphans, all that, if you make that important, that's what your people are going to make important. But if you make signs, wonders, and miracles important, and you don't say anything about orphans, anything about missions, nothing about feeding the homeless, nothing, it's just miracle signs and wonders, well, then that's what your people are going to be focused on. And they're going to be inwardly focused. It's going to, what can God do for me? As opposed to, what can I do to further the gospel and to further God's mission on the earth? And it is extremely important that we focus on the right things.
Yeah. And just a side note that, the congregation is going to take on the personality of the pastor.
That's right.
I learned that being a youth pastor.
Yeah.
And as much as we don't think teenagers want to hear a message, they do.
Yeah.
They want to see it too. And I had to learn because it was easy for me to preach on how to overcome their obstacles. They're teenagers. They have new obstacles every day, whether it's sin, whether it's friendships, what, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was always easy to preach those types of messages. But if you want to, and I just wanted to see more from our teenagers, and I realized, well, seeing more from our teenagers meant there need to be more from me as a leader, because all
Yeah,
they're doing is taking on the personality of me, right?
that's right.
And
Yep.
so if I'm just going to continue to talk about overcoming obstacles, they're never going to, like, we got to preach about the victories, and we've got to apply that to the community, and we've got to get out and we've got to share the good news, and we've got to you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so once we started becoming more active in our faith, instead of just preaching about it, and actually started doing it and celebrating it, and then I started seeing more ownership from the kids in the ministry. There was a little bit more, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I love the motivational mess. I love the, you got to chase your lion, or
Right.
whatever, right? But there's a time and place for that. And then there's a time and place for teaching and applying. And so, yeah, I mean, I know we've gone off a little bit, but it's important. It's important if we're going to talk about sustaining adults, through adulthood, through young adults, then we're going to have to apply ownership, right? You go to a church because you own part of that ministry. You're a part of the church. You're an arm piece. You're a leg piece. You're the body. And so if you don't feel like you're a part of the body, you're not going to attend the body. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so if I don't feel like I'm the foot, I'm not going to act like the foot. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
Right.
so I think that it's super important that we find a place, we find ways and avenues for all types of people to get involved, to find their skill set, to find what they enjoy, what they desire, and allow that to happen and create that ownership.
Yeah, man. I will never forget. I was leaving in church just a few years ago, and kids were getting out of the youth group, and I will never forget this. Like it, like I, it just, man, I can't tell you what it did to my heart.
Hmm.
They were coming out of service, and kids can come out of service like, oh man, they had a great prayer service, or oh, it was a great worship, or it was a great whatever, man, we really got, we got in touch with God tonight, or whatever. It wasn't one of those services. It was actually a service where the youth pastor decided to actually give the kids evidence for Christ, the like actual archaeological evidence, scientific evidence that Jesus is who he says he was, that the things in the Bible are actually true. Those kids came out of that youth group, and I had no idea that's what was taught when they first came out. But they were running and they were jumping and they were ecstatic because they were like, we have never heard this stuff before. We had no idea that the
Mhm.
Bible could be backed up in archaeology, in science, because, a lot of people just think like the Bible is, unto itself. Like it's just this book, and you just have to believe whatever it says, no matter there's no corroborating evidence or anything like that. It's just this book that everyone is supposed to magically believe, right? Not understanding all of the overwhelming evidence that there is. I mean, there's more, and I don't know if some of you guys know this, but there is more evidence and more corroborating evidence for a lot of things in the New Testament than there is for some of the history books that we have. We have more evidence in archaeology and in history on some of the things that we see in the Bible than we do on some of the stuff that we've seen in recent history, right? So you got kids in school that are listening and saying, okay, George Washington lived. Okay, he was the first president of the United States. They've never been there. They have no idea. They just going based on history and the tradition that he was president of the United States, which we know he was, right? Okay. But we believe that. But then when you show them the Bible, which is a history book, they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. Was there really a Moses? Was there really an Adam and Eve? I don't know. Well, just like you weren't there for George Washington, you weren't there for Adam and Eve. But for some reason, you believe that George Washington lived, but you don't believe that Adam and Eve lived, right? But when you understand the archaeological evidence, when you see the scientific evidence, when you see all of the other things that you can dig up, man, it is amazing. And so to see those kids come out of youth group that night, it just ecstatic. And I thought maybe they had a great time in prayer, or they just had a great worship service and they were just jumping around and whatever. It wasn't that. It was because they finally realized that there was some backup to their faith, that there was some actual
Yeah.
evidence to their faith, and that's powerful. So teaching, and it's not always inspirational, but actually teaching is so important. So this same research asked this same group of people, what do you think is missing from your community of worship? And some of the answers that they gave was opportunities to fight injustice and oppression.
Mm.
Yikes. And pastors, if you're listening, listen to what people are saying here. And this is 17%. 17% said opportunities to fight injustice and oppression. I will tell you right now, that's what millennials want to do. They want to see their dollars. They want to see us actually go out and actually do something about the plight that we see people in the world. They don't care about the color of the carpet. They don't care about the color of the pews. They could care less. They don't even care as much. If you read statistics, they don't even care as much about smoke and lights and lasers and all the stuff that we think is important to them. That's actually not what they care about.
Mm-mm.
They care about fighting injustice.
No, they care about movements.
That's right.
And and again, that's why we've seen movements within the church, right?
Yeah.
Church constantly, but what they care about is the social movements, and they should. I mean, that's the world they live in. And what better place to get wisdom on how to respond and how to fight the way that Jesus has shown us, the way that God talks about in his word. Again, that goes back to, they want relevance in their life. Well, they're faced with this every day they go to work. There is a social injustice that's being talked about. They have to formulate an opinion in a conversation. And I do think there needs to be some ownership from the pulpit. A lot of times we try to shy away from politics. We try to shy away from social issues because, it just brings tension. The right approach with a biblical answer can also relieve the tension. And so I think, not to cut you off, man, but I think that answer I bet you you went nationally with that. It would be one of the more popular answers, especially right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. The other was vocational training. That's one thing they feel like is missing. And I agree with that. I think the church, we look to the government for all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But man, how awesome would it be for the church to be at the forefront of vocational training?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, because because we say we want to change our culture. We want to change our society. Why don't the church train our next leaders? Why don't the church train our next senators and our state representatives and attorneys and, congressmen and women? I mean, could you imagine if they got their start in the church?
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have half the issues that we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I think sometimes as a church, we get confused on, really what is what's important. And so I think something like that is awesome.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing they say is missing is social gatherings outside of the worship space. Now, I think this is getting more popular, where small groups, and then obviously your small group goes out to eat, axe throwing, bowling, whatever the case may be.
Throwing, that would be awesome.
Yeah, see, that's what we got. We got to get a small group for Kyle that he wants to go axe throwing.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so things like that, they want to get out, they want to socialize, and I agree. I think the church should be a place where, and the great thing about stuff like that is you can invite people that are not saved.
Yeah.
Because there's some people that'll never step foot in the church, but they will step foot in the bowling alley.
Right.
They will step foot in the skating rink. Why? Because they're having fun. But the awesome thing about that is they're having fun with some good people, and they can learn about Christ in the midst of that.
People need people. And
that's right.
and it's a little offsetting when the only time, especially for young adults, man, like their schedules are crazy.
Yeah.
And I just had a conversation with a couple, they're a young adult couple, and they're having a they have a huge church, and they're having a hard time finding just some young adult couples that they can mesh with. And I mean, there's a lot of, you're talking a couple of hundred, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're in the hundreds with young adults, and you would think, well, it should be pretty easy for you to find some. But if you're not having gatherings that there's no strings attached, it's like we're just going to hang out. Because relationships in the church are huge.
Yes.
The one of the
Yes.
things that we need to see are relationships that are going to last a lifetime. Those are the glue sometimes, even to your relationship with God, because there are
Yes.
going to be times where things just get untucked, man, and you're going to
Yeah.
need that support from your friends. You're going to need
Hmm.
that constant voice that's like, okay, hey, listen, I get it. It's rough, it's hard, but remember, and the way to develop that is to build the trust outside of it. If you can
100%.
trust them without there being a religious string attached, you're going to trust them. You know what I'm saying?
That's
You're
right.
going to trust their Jesus because you trust them. And even when you serve the same Jesus, but when your life unravels, you're not thinking logically. But when
Right.
that voice can come and bring you back to logic, well, guess what? It's the same Jesus you know what I'm saying? So I think that there's an importance to being able to put a commitment on saying, we're just going to hang out with people. That's all we're
Mm,
going to do tonight. We're
mm,
just, I want to know about you. I want to learn about you. I want to get to know you. You know what I'm
mhm.
saying? And develop that friendship that, let's be honest, bars have no problem helping people do that.
Right. Yep.
Clubs have no problem helping people do that.
Yep.
Sporting events have no problem helping people do that. And so the church shouldn't have a problem helping people do that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? No strings attached. We just want to build a crowd. We want to build relationships within the crowd. And everybody has their own agenda for that, right? Our agenda would be to reach the lost, to disciple those that are found. And so I think that it's important to capitalize on the relationship aspect of that.
It's really cool because there was a church some years back that actually owned, and it was very controversial. People, even when you said it, they were like, "What?" But they actually owned a Christian nightclub, and it, but and so many people are talking about it. I went out there because I wanted to see, like what is this place? What's
Uh-huh.
going on? Uh, It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, and I think almost every church needs to have one. And here's the thing: they had a separate building that was not it wasn't near the it was near the church, but it wasn't on the church property. It was a building. It looked just like a restaurant inside. You go in, it had the bar, and of course they were not selling alcoholic beverages or anything like that, but they were selling all kind of different types of coffee. And coffee is extremely popular right now. And they were selling all kinds of like coffees and drinks that and stuff like that. And then they had a bunch of booths where you could get snacks, you could eat, you could order stuff. They had pool tables, they had foosball, they had just to hang out. They had some just cool music playing. And then they had another room where they had like a sound stage, and what they would do is they would have local bands or some famous bands. And I'll tell you, one famous band that was there that I got to see before they got big was Need to Breathe. Need to
Mm.
Breathe is amazing. I literally stand like where I was standing, I could touch the stage, like I could just rest my hands on the stage. And there was Bo and his guys, they're just right there. And it was just a cool experience. It's stuff like this, right? Like they're like as Kyle said, people need people, right? We already have that desire to be around people, to congregate, to commune with people. If it doesn't happen in the church, it's going to happen in the bar. It's going to
Yeah.
happen in the nightclub, right? It's going to happen in area places that we don't necessarily want to see people go. But if we can provide an alternative for them, what an awesome. And I had so much fun that night. I think I went maybe 2 or 3 times to that club. There was also, and actually another artist I saw there was Jeremy Camp before Jeremy Camp got big. Like it was just maybe a couple of hundred of us, and we were packed. I mean, Lord, we
Mm.
could not do that right now, but we were packed. It was standing room only. I mean, like you could just smell the hot breath of the person behind you. Like it was,
Ugh.
yeah,
Christian version of St. Andrews.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was, yep, like St. Andrews Hall. Yep.
Oof.
And yeah, it was just, it was crazy. But you know what? We had fun. We
Yeah.
danced. We had fun with each other. So that's the kind of stuff. But it was all clean. I didn't have to leave feeling guilty. We had some real good time there. But a couple other things that they said. What do you think is missing from your community? Is workshops for strengthening relationships. Hey, listen, we need to build great relationships. And I'm sure this is probably talking about marriages, stuff like that. We should always have an outlet for people to be able to learn how to grow in their relationships with their wives and their husbands, and new budding relationships, right? And so that's super important. The support groups for challenges in my life. That is so, so, so important. Everybody's facing so many challenges, whether it be financial, mental health, whether it be like, there's so many things that people are facing right now. Family challenges, alcohol and drug abuse, just so many things, right? And that's where we go, right? We shouldn't have to go to AA. Church should be there. I'm not saying you don't go to AA. What I'm saying is the church should be the first stop that you go. Besides the altar, besides somebody telling you that they need to pray it out of you, there needs to be an actual practical place where you can go and receive the things that you need to receive. It's crazy what shows up again on this list is opportunities to care for the poor and needy. First, they said opportunities to fight injustice and oppression, but here it comes again in the language of opportunities to care for the poor and needy. We should be that should be every church every week. We should be doing that. That's a part of our DNA as a Christian.
Can I just throw something in there?
Yep.
Today, we on our way to church, we had stopped. Dude, I had saved these 4 quarters for the snack shop, bro. I was like, I'm getting a pop today, like Mountain Dew. That's what I'm getting. We stopped at a red light, and dude, I stopped like face to face with this homeless guy, and it's that awkward moment where you're like, he's expecting me to give him something because I'm right here. I'm not 3 cars down. I'm right.
Right.
Like, you know what though? I need to give it. So I gave him the 4 quarters, right? I'm like, whatever. And my wife was like, you know what stinks is we don't really know, like, we don't know it stinks that people have ripped people off before, and it's ruined the fact that people genuinely want to give. They just don't know. And just if you're in that boat, here's one thing I learned from a pastor before. It's not our job to figure out whether they're truly homeless or not. 100%. It's not.
Yep.
By the word of God, it's our job to take care of them. Yep. It's our job to help them out. And it's going to be between them and God to answer, because that is, I mean, I firmly believe like that is a serious thing for God. And if you're going to go around mimicking that you're needy and you're poor, there's going to be a special conversation for you. Right. But I mean, that's not biblical, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's severe.
Yeah. Right.
Let me just disclaimer, that's not in the Bible. But what I'm saying is he takes that serious. And so I just told her, I said, but it's not our job to figure that out. It's my job to respond. And I'm going to do my part and respond. And you know what, if I get gypped out of $1, well, okay, I get gypped out of $1. But if I can help somebody with $1, I'm going to help someone with $1. And that's the principle to that. And so when you're out there, just understand, like, it's not your job to judge that. It's your job to help that. So
yeah, absolutely. That's great. And one of the last ones I'll read, and there's other ones on here, but one of them is regular, what's missing from your community of worship, regular meeting with a mentor. I cannot tell you how many people long for this. They want this. They need this. The Bible talks about the older women in the church, teaching the younger women. I would say same thing for men. Older men should be teaching. And we didn't get a chance to get into all this part, and maybe we'll do this at some other time, but I would challenge every youth pastor. Your job as a youth pastor needs to be building a bridge and connecting your youth with the older people in the congregation. If you close the door, put smoke and lasers and turn off the lights and say, this is what they asked for, this is what they wanted, I will tell you that's not what they want. And even if they think that's what they want, that's not what they need. You can do it, because I mean, listen, I'm just like anybody else. I love smoke. I love lasers. I love going crazy for God. Like, I love it all. Here's the thing. You have to be able to build a bridge, because what happens is you end up creating a church inside of a church. And that's not what we're to do. We're the body of Christ. And so when you lock them in a room with only their kind of music, with only their kind of lights, their only kind of atmosphere, and they come out of that room, they look at somebody that's 70 years old and they go, you have nothing for me. There's nothing you can say to me there, because we can't relate. One of the biggest, and this is why I really believe that we see a huge decline when they get 18 years old. There's no 18 to 35s. Why? Because we have taught them that, hey, as long as you go in this room, we'll play your music. We'll do everything for you. You don't have to worry about those other people over there. That's just for people that, that's the older people over there. That's the problem. We've got to build a bridge where they understand the value of those older people in that main auditorium. And then the older people need to understand the value of that next generation in the youth group, because they in turn can look at the kids in the youth group and go, oh my goodness, what a rowdy bunch of kids. All they like is that hard rock music and smoke and lasers. Ain't no spirit of God in that. That's just a bunch of flesh, right? They will write them off because they don't understand. So as a youth pastor, in my opinion, you should be an architect at building the bridge between the Sunday morning crowd and your Wednesday night or Friday night or whenever you hold youth group, your people, because they need the wisdom of those older men that's in that sanctuary. They need, and that's just not the current model of youth groups right now. The current model is shut the door, put on the lasers and the lights, shut the fluorescence off, and man, we're gonna do our thing. But it trains them to think that's what is normal and that's all there is. So what happens is when they get 18 and they come out of youth group and they have to sit in the regular service, it's culture shock, because they feel like they have zero anything in common with people who are 50 years old, 40 years old. And really, these are the people that just got out of and kind of went through their next stage of life. They have everything to tell them. I mean, it's so I think as pastors, and I'm so passionate about this, I actually want to write a book about this, but I believe that we have to change our model of how we do youth ministry and put more focus on building that bridge with the older generation, because that's what God wants. He said in the Bible, the older women should teach the younger women. Do you see that ever? Like, do you see a 16-year-old girl, hormones going crazy, not sure who she is, not understand, on Pinterest, comparing herself to everybody? Do you see her sitting down with a 50-year-old woman? Rarely. Maybe her mom, but she don't even like her mom because she's 15. Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, and usually the youth pastor and their wives are young as well.
Right.
So it's and not in all cases, but this is biblical. And so when they say that they want to meet with a mentor, guys, this is what they need.
And we talk about youth group a little bit. I think it's important. And Kev, you've really taught me this. There's something about the church championing fatherhoods, sonships. Like God moves in that way where he's calling you to be a father for a season, or he's calling you to be a son or a daughter for a season. And Like there's times where I've been that I've had to be this, like I've needed a father basically,
Yeah.
right? Or I've
Yep.
needed a spiritual mother, or whatever that is. And that's not over spiritualizing it. Like that's truth.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be a time when God starts to call me to be a spiritual father. And
That's
so
right.
you've been a youth pastor. That's different. It's a little different. I'm shepherding a
Yes.
flock. I've had leaders that have been fathers, and I've had leaders that have been mothers. And yeah, I've been a father and a mother. Not a mother. My wife's been a mother, but
Yeah.
there's going to be a time where I'm going to have to partner with my church and say, okay, I've got to get involved here, and
Mhm.
God's going to entrust me to people who are underneath me, and
That's
that's
right.
going to be a fatherhood there.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for adults to get involved in the youth ministry in leadership for more than just the students,
That's right.
for the youth pastor, because the
That's
youth
right.
pastor more times than not is going to be young.
Yeah.
And if the youth pastor is good enough, and I mean this, he's going to look to that older leadership. He's going
Yeah.
to look for their response, and he's going to look for what they think about his response. And that's important that you have that balance there. It's important you have that all throughout the church, but more importantly, with the young adults and with the teenagers, they need the older generation. They need it.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And so, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, and you guys that are listening, just sound off with us. Let us know. I mean, do you identify with some of these things that Barna is saying? There's a lot of people they surveyed, and pastors, same thing. I hope that you get something out of this as well. A lot of you guys are doing some amazing jobs. I mean, just amazing. I know our church, I just brag about our church. We are blessed.
Mhm.
We belong to an
Absolutely.
amazing ministry. And so, and I mean, they have everything you can imagine, and they're trying to shepherd things right. And it's just awesome.
Yeah.
And every church doesn't have the resources that our church has, and we're not saying that every church does, but with whatever you have, shepherd well. And,
Shepherd well.
and as us as parishioners, let's do everything that we can to be a help to our
Mhm.
pastors to
Mhm.
shepherd well. When
Yeah.
they ask for volunteers, or they ask for, people to maybe donate for scholarships for the kids to go to youth retreat, or if they say, hey, we're going to do a mentorship program, raise your hand, be that mentor, be that person. Don't say I don't have anything to give. If you live life, you've got something to give. Be the church,
Mm.
because the youth needs you, and you need the youth. Believe it or
Yep.
not, there's something that can be taught both ways. So um, that's something I think that's important. So hopefully you guys got something out of this today, and like I say, just get on Facebook. Let us know. We'll post some stuff up there. Just let us know what you think, and yeah, we love to see it. We love to see it. So check us out everywhere. We're on Facebook, Thinking Out Loud. We're on Twitter, Instagram. All of these things are on YouTube. We don't talk about it a lot, but we put these are posted on YouTube. So all of our shows are posted there. You can also listen to our podcast on our website, thinkingoutloud media.com. If you're a pastor out there and you're wanting us to come speak at your church, Kyle and I will be happy to come and speak. And we can speak on many different topics. Or if you've got a roundtable discussion that you want us to come talk to your congregation, we're certainly willing to do that as well. So, but go to our website, thinkingoutloudmedia.com, and just contact us there, and we will get you in touch with our person that will schedule those speaking engagements. Okay. Hope you guys have a great week. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.